Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, delighted to be talking with someone that has an impressive books with pictures collection behind them, as well as quite a distinguished brontosaurus, it looks like. And that is comics creator Aaron Lopresti. Aaron, thank you for jumping in and talking with me.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
My pleasure. Thanks for saying yes. Thanks for coming on. And the following format, I tend to mention a few titles, but you have quite an arrangement of work that you've done over the years. And so I know you've worked for DC, Malibu, all sorts of places, all sorts of characters. And I'll just mention Elseworlds being one of those DC books that I really enjoyed. Death of
Okay.
Hawkman as well.
Thank you.
And then to pull one out that was a big part of my life about 20 years ago, the Left Behind comics series. You were the artist of
Yeah,
Left
yeah,
Behind from way back. Yeah,
yeah. That
yeah.
was that kind of got thrown my way during one of the periods where I didn't have a lot of work going on. And I think it was through Wildstorm.
Oh, okay.
Um, uh, Being a Christian, they knew I was, that might be something I'd be interested in. And full disclosure, I was at that point, I was interested in anything because I didn't have any work going on. But,
Right.
um, I was glad to get it. I can tell you that. And then I got through, I don't know, they were doing bouncing back and forth. It was multiple issue thing. And I think I drugged Paul Ryan, who's a friend of mine, into it to do half the book or whatever, and then I ended up getting an X-Men job or something, and so I didn't finish the whole thing, but I think did 3 or 4 issues of it, and
Yeah.
they were like prestige formats, so they were like there was a lot of pages in there. So I was thankful to have it because it was a lot of work at the time, but I of course was familiar with the books and everything
Yeah.
before I actually got into it, so I knew what it was going to be before we got into it. And I remember the guy that was doing the adaptation was like, man, all the exciting stuff keeps happening off camera. I go, I know. So we're drawing a bunch of people talking, and we're like, well, what about where's the earthquakes? Where's the plane crashes? Where's the? But it
Yeah.
just the way it worked out.
Yeah. That story was big in my life, being a longtime member of a faith community. And I don't know, as a person of faith, I appreciate the mythic quality of comics anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, yeah. I did not know if that was one that you had talked about in a while, so I thought I would mention that as well.
No, in fact, I usually, as you can imagine, especially in a secular industry, that's not one that comes up
Right.
very often, unless it's I'm getting interviewed by another Christian or something. Then that could pop up. But I haven't. No, I haven't had any conversations about that for quite some time. It was a pretty popular novel series there for a while. Probably what was it?
Hmm.
Probably 15 years ago or so now.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a big deal when they did it. They felt like they would do good numbers with it. Not, I honestly don't know how well it sold through the regular comic book marketplace, and if they got it in through Christian bookstores or something. Back then I didn't really pay that much attention to what was going on beyond me turning my pages in and looking for the next script kind of thing. So
Hmm. Hmm. And much has changed since then. Much has changed, I'm sure.
yeah, well, for me it has. Yeah, I'm now that I've been self-publishing now for you know, probably a good 2 years.
Hmm.
And now I do everything. So, I'm well aware of all the stuff that goes on after the book is drawn, after the
Hmm.
book's written, after the book is drawn. And then I spend half my time, if I happen to have someone working with me or for me, managing that. And then, making sure that the book is properly edited and there's no, typos, and then getting to the printer, getting files formatted, and then
Hmm.
having to reformat them after the printer says, "Oh, this isn't going to work." And you're like, and then the final stage, shipping everything out, which we just finished with my latest book. We just finished shipping it all out. So
Hmm.
this week has been kind of a wind down week a little bit before I get ramped up and start drawing my next project. So
Nice, nice. I've caught you at a moment in between.
yeah, just one of those brief. The brief moment. I'm busier now at 59 than I ever was at any point. And I just kept thinking, man, if only I'd done this when I was like 35, I would have had so much more energy.
At least it sounds
Uh,
like you're passionate about it and engaged with it, and um,
well,
that's got to be a good place to be.
it is. And what you realize is you get when you're working in the mainstream, doing Spider-Man, X-Men, Justice League, all these different books that I've worked on. Because I was such a fanboy growing up as a kid, that it was exciting. Oh my gosh, I
Mhm.
finally get to draw Superman, or I finally get to draw Batman, or I finally get to draw Spider-Man. But then, and you get so immersed in that, um, where you're that lifestyle where you're drawing something and then you're looking for your next job. Then you're drawing something and then you're looking for your next job. And it just keeps perpetually going. You've got kids growing up, you got to pay for college, you got all these other things. You all you can think about is find the next job,
Mhm.
so I can pay my bills. And then and it's hard to break out of that. And when I
Yeah.
was younger and just looking to get into comics, I wanted to do my own stuff more than I probably wanted to work for Marvel or DC. But once you get
Mhm.
into that sort of uh, hamster wheel, it's you don't get off it, right? You stay in it, and because it's like you said, you find a way to. It's the way you pay your bills and make ends meet. And what happened was when I was working at DC probably for the last since I think 2012, I was
Mhm.
on contract on and off with DC, and that's the only people I worked for. I worked for Marvel, before that, but um, I just kind of got comfortable, and I knew Dan DiDio, who was the publisher, really well. I knew the art director, Mark Chiarello, really well. I knew a lot of the editors, so I never had any trouble keeping busy. But then when AT&T at the time, who owned Warner Brothers, came in, I believe it was September of 2020 or 2019, whatever that COVID year was,
Mhm.
um, they just came in and cleaned house. And so here I was, I think 56, 57 years old, and everybody that I knew was gone.
Wow.
And I thought, well, am I going to go at 57 years old? Am I going to start groveling for work again, like I did when I was, in my 20s, where I said, no, this isn't my opportunity to take all these intellectual properties that I've created over the years and just never done anything with
Mhm.
and do it. And so I just kind of put my both feet in the water at once and went for it. And it's so far it's worked out okay.
Yeah, I
And it
love it.
is nice because now I'm working on my stuff that I own. And I guess my point to all that story was that when you finally get out of it, the mainstream, and you look and you realize that you've been working for companies for, in my case, 30 years,
Mhm.
and you don't own anything. All you ever got for the work and everything you put into it was a paycheck. And once that paycheck's gone, you have nothing. And at some
Mhm.
point, you're going to age out, which is essentially where I was headed anyway. And so now that I'm doing my own thing and getting positive response from it, it's really gratifying, to
Yeah.
kind of be able to say, I'm doing my own thing. I'm in control of the characters and the stories that I want to do.
Mhm.
And no one can tell me you can't do that, or oh, that'll never sell. We can't do that, which is usually what you hear most of the time whenever you come up with an idea to
Mhm.
Marvel or DC is, if it's not Spider-Man or X-Men, we don't want to do it, kind of thing. So, and now I don't have any desire to, it's like I've done that, and I don't
Yeah.
have any desire to necessarily go back and revisit it. I'm really satisfied as long as things keep working out,
Mhm.
for me doing my own stuff. That it's a great feeling, really, to sort of try and create your own cultural iconography, if you will,
Yeah.
and see if it sticks and see if you can get an audience for it that is sustainable. So,
Yeah, yeah. But I've wondered as I've talked with creators, that moment where you realize, oh, I have this great idea, I have this character, I'm going to contribute this. But if you're working for one of the big two and you contribute that idea, it's now part of their consortium. And
right.
so it's out of your hands. And so I imagine as a creator, there is that moment of, do I want to hold off on this if I want to be smart about this and actually, build my own world at some point with the ideas that I have?
Well, and that's the thing. I guess I'm lucky in that regard that no one wanted to do any of my ideas when I when I was at Marvel or DC, because I would have just given them to them just to do them, and not really thought down the road. And because we didn't, there was that brief moment in the 90s when Image broke away from
Hmm.
Marvel Comics and the independent comics market sort of boomed, and it seemed like, wow, this is a real possibility going forward. And then, of course, the market crashed and was in terrible shape for several years and slowly built back up again.
Hmm.
Um, so just when we started to think, oh, maybe this is a new avenue for us to take our material and go and do this and do that, it died. And then we thought, well, okay, well, now everybody's scrambling just to get jobs at Marvel and DC again. And so those, um, although I had a lot of ideas and concepts, and in the 90s we're toying with, seeing the success of Image and thinking, well, we can do our own label, we can do our own characters. And I say we, meaning, me and my fellow creatives, that I was in touch with. And I was in a studio in Portland in the 90s called Studio Source that had a lot of great artists and writers in there. And so we were constantly thinking about, well, how can we do this? How can we do our own stuff? But then, like I said, when the market crashed, that kind of all just went away, and we were scrambling, trying to find work anywhere we could, and the idea of producing your own stuff kind of went to the back burner, and it stayed there for me until just now. And now it's given me a new level of fun and excitement that I haven't had in a while. So there is that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure that's where you want to be as a creator, that place of flow and fun and excitement, and as you mentioned, telling the stories that you want to tell.
Exactly. And you don't, again, when you're in the midst of the mainstream and the rat race of you don't really think about it. But having the time now away from that, and I see people posting drawings of, Spider-Man or whoever,
Hmm.
and I look at that and I think, this person is just promoting Marvel's characters and DC's characters, but they're not really doing anything for themselves. Because what you find out, and what I found out in the industry, and this was an eye opener for me when I started working on Wonder Woman. I left Marvel and went to DC, and the first thing I worked on was Wonder Woman. I did that for 2 years, and I was so popular with the Wonder Woman crowd. Oh my gosh, you're the best Wonder Woman artist ever, and all this kind of stuff. You feel pretty good about yourself. Everybody wants to buy your original art. And then you leave one. I left Wonder Woman and went and did, I think, Justice League International.
Hmm.
And all those people that loved me on Wonder Woman didn't necessarily come over with me to Justice League. They stayed at Wonder Woman and waited for the next artist. And then
Hmm.
that new artist was now their favorite Wonder Woman artist. All these started to realize that, wait a minute, any popularity that I may have is due to whatever character I happen to be working on that somebody else owns.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So it's not you're not getting necessarily popular because of what you're doing. You're getting popular because of whatever character you happen to be working on. Now, some guys are big enough that they kind of transcend that, and whatever they do, people follow them and say, "Oh, I gotta get whatever Greg Capullo does, or I have to get, fill in artist here, David Finch,
Hmm.
But that wasn't the case with me, and most guys, it's not the case with. So to actually be able now to create our own characters, put them out there, and now your name is intrinsically attached to that character. So that character becomes popular. You become popular with it because you're the guy who created it and you're the guy that's doing it. And it's a very different dynamic than what I experienced in the mainstream, where any popularity I may have had was directly related to whatever I was working on.
Yeah, yeah. That
And I
makes a
didn't
lot of
own
sense.
any of it, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, you create characters and DC gets them. And for me, it was mostly, a villain here or there. I worked on a Excalibur series with Chris Claremont where we created a ton of new X-Men, which I don't own any of those.
Hmm.
Neither does Chris, of course. And the only upside to that is if they use them someplace, make toys out of them, put them in a movie, you get a little bit of money out of that,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And unfortunately, they haven't used any of those characters we created, at least yet. Eventually they're going to run out of
Hopefully at
characters, and
some
maybe
point.
they'll go and use some of them, and maybe I'll get a royalty check or something. But yeah, so it's nice to know that at the very least that the characters I'm doing now are the ones that I own. And if, someone wanted to do a movie or a TV show or a cartoon or something like that, that I would be the one who benefits from that mostly rather than, a corporate entity that you're hoping, throws you a few breadcrumbs.
Hmm. I'm curious about the kinds of stories that you're drawn to now that you have the creative freedom and kind of the story threads that you're attracted to and that you want to share.
Well, I find this very strange. I know a lot of Christian guys who are big monster guys, and I don't understand why that is. What our problem is that we're drawn to monsters, and I it may just be the complete fantasy element of creatures that don't exist. That's the ultimate in someone who creates this type of stuff. It's like there's no restrictions. You can come up with whatever you want, and so there's a certain amount of fun that kind of liberates you from average everyday life. That maybe that's part of the attraction. um, but in terms of stories, my stories, when I craft a story, the thing that's always important to me is the moral and the payoff of that story.
Hmm.
So I generally don't. I'm doing a humor thing right now, but it's not something anybody's going to read and go, "Wow, that was deep." It's just for fun and for laughs. But
Hmm.
the series that I've been working on, Wraith of God, is is this guy it's an old west kind of Batman-esque type character, monster hunter,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it's Christian themed underneath it because he believes he's seen a vision from God that put him on this quest to destroy monsters. His partner Esther is a um, defined Christian character who is kind of roped into being his partner, and now she's into this whole thing of monster hunting with him.
Hmm.
But I always try to there's got to be a moral point for me to the story that pays off at the end. So what are the characters learning? And it's usually questions that I face myself, like what in a Christian sense, it would be, what is God's will for my life? In a
Hmm.
general
Hmm.
Christian, or pardon me, in a general sense, for just people maybe that aren't religious at all, or they would just be, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Kind of thing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that's a question we sort of all deal with on some level.
Yeah.
Either what does God want me to do, or what's my purpose in the cosmos? Why am I here? Right.
Hmm.
And those were kind of the ideas that were at the core of what I was dealing with the first Wraith of God issue, even though they're hunting down werewolves and there's all this mystery and this intrigue and stuff. But underneath it all, there was this um, the Esther character was kind of told more from her point of view, and her trying to figure out, was she doing the right thing?
Hmm.
Was she, because she had worked at the Salvation Army, and then she got manipulated into helping him, and then she's on this journey with him and wondering if this is really what she should be doing. And so that was kind of the thing I was exploring in this one. The second issue, which just came out, we just shipped out, Wraith of God Blood Hunters, was more a issue of a question of faith, and what does that mean,
Hmm.
and do I really have the faith that I think I have, and so things like that. So I try to always have some sort of, it's not necessarily a Christian moral, but just a moral, that can be something that I want to comment on, but and then somehow incorporate it into the lives of the characters,
Hmm.
so that they will learn something from that, and I can kind of like um, explore that for myself through these characters, and reach some sort of resolution. And so that's my motivating, regardless of what characters I happen to be working with.
Hmm.
When I'm writing a story, I'm always, my first thing is, what's my purpose beyond just the narrative. He goes from A to B, gets the bad guy, everybody's happy at the end, but what's underneath all of this? What journey am I taking my characters on? What are they going to learn from this? What questions maybe do I have in my own personal life that I can sort of interject into this story, and maybe find my answers as well, for me personally as well as the characters. So
Yeah.
um, that's kind of how I approach writing and coming up with these stories.
Love that. I love that. And there's so many questions there that I think a lot about writing as sort of a process for the writer as well as the audience. So, I mean, those are big questions of what's my purpose? If I go through something difficult, do I still believe there's good in the universe, whether
Mhm.
you call it God or something else? And
Right.
so I love that, those universal themes.
Yeah, and I think for me, I don't ever looked at myself as someone who's going to do something really outside the box or reinvent the wheel. Um, I like to when I read comics or even books, fantasy books, Edgar Rice Burroughs, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, there's always a certain level of entertainment and adventure. You want that escapism, right? And so you don't ever, for me, you don't ever want to lose that element. So um, the first thing that regardless of how deep the moral question of the story may be, I don't ever want it to turn into talking heads or,
Hmm.
dime store philosophy or anything like that. There's got to be an adventure in there. You got to hit those beats
Hmm.
where this is exciting. The roller coaster of, oh, I'm going to take you right to the edge and then I'm going to let you rest for a couple of pages. Then we're going to go back up again. And you almost, for me anyway, I'm not a real structured writer in the sense that, you do these steps and,
Hmm.
make sure you include this and do this and do this. I write kind of by feel. And I went to film school at USC and I have a sort of a feel for, if you were speaking in terms of film, you look at it, you can go, that scene's too long. It needs to be cut.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
don't just, there's not something that says you can't do a scene that's more than a minute and 15 seconds long, right? But
Hmm.
by watching it, you should be able to say, okay, no, stop it right there. This is going
Hmm.
on too long. We need to move to something else. And that's kind of how I write. I'll write if I have a scene between two characters that's important for whatever to establish a relationship or some character bit, you can sit there and go, okay, this is just going on way too long. I need to condense the dialogue. I need to get to the point and then move on to something a little bit more exciting. And that's kind of how I write. So I feel like that um, that I am in tune with the audience in terms of because I look at myself as an average a consumer, moviegoer, reader, whatever, and so I figure most people are going to kind of be in the same boat I am. And so if I think this is getting too boring, or I'll cut it
Hmm.
and move this scene in and maybe lengthen out the fight scene because I know people are going to want more of that. Those type of things. And I don't try to get too cute. I just follow that sort of gut feeling, and that some of it is training and some of it is intuitive. Um, and then I structure my stories that way in terms of um, pacing,
Hmm.
um, and what I'm going to put in there in content and how I'm going to put that content in there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just a very I always come up with like I said, a point to the story, moral to the story, if you will, and then kind of come up with the ending. Where is this thing going to go? Because then you can just kind of work backwards and it all fits together. And then once you put this whole thing together, that's when you can go in and say, too short, too long, not enough of this, too much of that, and then
Hmm.
get it to, whatever your page count is. And that's what I consider entertainment writing. I don't think I could sit down and write a novel. I think that's something totally different than what I do. But I could write, a TV show, a movie script, comic book script, which
Hmm.
is more, um, it's less about words and vocabulary and punctuation, and more about feeling and um, getting an emotional response or a visceral response from people when they read it.
Yeah. You anticipated a question that I was going to ask, which was about the connection to comics versus prose, um, and comics versus film. So,
Well,
uh,
when I was a kid, at the very earliest ages that I can remember, and this would be even pre-kindergarten, I never was a kid who just drew pictures. I was a
mhm,
kid who wrote stories and drew pictures to go with the stories. Now, I didn't really discover comic books until I was, I don't know, 11 years old. We used to do like kept creative writing, right?
Hmm.
And so we'd have these books and we'd write stories. And most kids would write about, oh, we went to the zoo and blah, 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 right? And
Hmm.
I'm writing about this adventure on Mars and these, weird creatures. And so I would write the story and then I would draw the picture that went with the story. I never
Hmm.
just wrote the story. And and then when I discovered comic books, um, I was like, this is the ultimate way of telling a story with words and combination of pictures. And so I just gravitated towards that. And that was only the thing that really interested me. I've always been a sci-fi monster fantasy type fan my whole life, even as a little kid.
Hmm.
So I was always writing stories like that. But I never felt like I was comfortable sitting down. I mean, I think I tried to write a novel once and I got about two paragraphs into it and I was like, I just didn't have the patience for it. And then understanding that you know, how different it is in terms of just character exploration along the way. And the stuff that you would do in a novel that may take 15 to 20 pages, you could never do in a movie or a comic book. And so I was a big movie fan growing up as well. And that's just kind of how I learned and understood storytelling was in those formats. And it was
Yeah.
comfortable for me. It was something that worked for me and was easy for me to kind of grasp and understand, where writing a novel is forget it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't even try it.
The multiple page description of a character getting out of bed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you got to make that interesting when it's really something that wouldn't be interesting. And
Hmm.
and it's you're always seeing visuals in your head, right? I mean, as an artist,
Hmm.
I'm always seeing visuals in my head, and you're just like, there's nothing interesting about this guy getting, like you said, getting out of bed and putting his slippers on, and I don't know. So I guess to answer your question, the appeal has always been, as far back as I can remember, was this sort of combination of telling stories and visualizing those stories.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that was kind of the language of writing for me. And I just and so when I went to school or what I would read about techniques and things it was always geared in that direction. It was always towards screenplays and things like that. It was never about writing the great American novel. It was
Yeah.
always about telling a story, uh, and it either as a film or a comic book.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate both film and comics too. And I think in my memory, I discovered them about the same time through like
Mhm.
the late 80s and Batman and Tim Burton and those kind of things.
Yeah.
So
I joked before we went on that, I don't have any books back here that are just, you know, prose books. They're all about art or have art in them in some way. Um, I found in my older age that I've really drawn to nonfiction now, is in terms of, um, like when I was younger, I would read, Edgar Rice Burroughs or Robert E. Howard or, whoever, Star
mhm,
Wars novel, whatever. And now I'm much more interested in nonfiction stuff, maybe because they get to the point quicker,
mhm,
you know,
mhm.
because I'm a
Yeah.
very impatient person, and someone that's telling you facts just sort of tells you the facts, right? It
Yeah.
gets you on to the next fact.
True. Very true. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I think I have one more official question, and we can
sure.
hit anything that we've missed, and that is how folks out there can connect and find Empire Comics and connect with more of the storytelling that you're doing, social media wise, website wise, conventions, or anything like that that you'd like to
Well,
mention.
I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all under Aaron Lopresti. I was one of those fortunate guys who, I guess, I got on these social media sites early enough that I didn't have to put a number by my name or anything like that. I don't know
Mhm.
if there's that many Aaron Loprestis out there anyway, but so you can find me on any of those just by spelling my name correctly. And I have a website, which is aaronlopresti.com. Again, very easy if you can spell my name. Um, Most of the campaigns I run are crowd-funded campaigns for these books, graphic novels, and they're on Indiegogo. The links are always to the campaigns. If you want to go check them out, the links are on my Twitter page, they're on my Facebook page, and they're on my Instagram page. So, and I actually will usually go out and buy the web address for whatever I'm doing, so I can have, for example, the latest one I'm doing is Kit Carter Planet Doom, which is kind of a 50s sci-fi girl that, you know, it's based on like EC Comics, those sort of visuals,
I
pulp
love it.
magazines, kind of
Yeah.
silly bubble helmet, you know, and it's a humorous adventure strip thing, and it's a graphic novel I'm working on right now. And I just went out and bought, you know, kitcarterplanetdoom.com. So you go to the, you go to that web, you go to www.kitcarterplanetdoom.com, and it'll just come up and give you a link right to the campaign. And I also have a YouTube channel where I do, excuse me, I have a Sunday show at uh, 4 o'clock Pacific time. I do a drawing show with David Williams, Kelsey Shannon, Gary Martin, called Graybeard Studio. We do that at
Nice.
1 o'clock Pacific time on Wednesdays. But again, if you go to YouTube and just type in Aaron Lopresti, it'll come up. So
Cool.
there's no tricks to finding me. It's just spelling my name correctly is the trick. That you can find out any, you know, all the projects I'm working on at any of those things just by typing my name in Google search, and some of that stuff should come up.
Fantastic. Well, I'll link the website for the
Well,
video
thank
and
you
the
very
audio.
much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
and
it.
of course I'll also link to your YouTube channel as well.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it
Yes,
very much.
absolutely. Did we miss anything in the talk that you want to make sure to share before we close?
Um, just that, well, what did I, just to clarify, you brought up Empire Comics, and that's kind of the label that I'm publishing my comics
Hmm.
under.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I think, and like I said, anything that you might want to know, I would encourage people to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, because that's where you will get updates. You know, I post a lot of art, things I'm working on, campaign links, things like that. Um, any of the books that have already been published, Wraith of God, Blood Hunters, I do have available copies of that stuff for back order if you missed it and want to get involved in reading those. So all that stuff is available, either by contacting me through email, which you can do through a link on my website, or messaging me through social media, which you can do obviously just by sending me a message on whatever platform you happen to be on.
All right, fantastic. And thank you for being open to the audience and being a person that it sounds like keeps the audience in mind as you're working and creating.
Yeah, without the audience, I've got nothing. It always cracks me up when people say, I'm making this for myself." No, you're making it for your audience, and if your audience doesn't like it, then you are making it for yourself, which gets
True.
you nowhere. So I am making stuff that I enjoy, but I'm doing it for an audience and doing it in a way that is attempting to appeal to as broad a you know, spectrum of people as possible.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you again for the time and glad to have you back anytime.
Thanks for having me on, Jason. I appreciate it very much.